Yay!
Ooh,
We're
gorgeous
live.
colors.
There it is. Yes, we're live.
Hello, hello.
Eee!
Hi, everyone, and welcome to Shop Talk Marginalized Creators on Craft. My name is Aaron H. Esteves, and my pronouns are he, him. I'm the author of This Is Why They Hate Us, a young adult novel coming spring 2022 from Simon & Schuster Books for Young Readers. This Is Why They Hate Us is a story of 17-year-old Enrique who tries to use the summer after his junior year to get over his feelings for his best friend Salim. I'm your moderator tonight, and I'm talking to the lovely and talented Jason June and Robbie Couch.
Hello,
Jason June, it's a two-name first name, like Mary Kate without the hyphen or the Olsen twin. He, him, she, her is a genderqueer writer mermaid who loves to create picture books that mix the flamboyantly wacky with the slightly dark, and young adult contemporary queer rom-coms full of love and lust and hijinks. When not writing, JJ zips about Austin, Texas with his Pomeranian, Pom Brokaw. His work includes the queer-inclusive Valentine's Day picture book, Porcupine Cupid, the whimsical chapter book series, Mermaid Island, and his debut rom-com, Jay's Gay Agenda, comes out. Oh, it just ends there. Oh, no, that was part of the sentence. Anyway, Jay's Gay Agenda is coming June 1st, yes?
First!
June
Yeah.
1st. Lovely cover, lovely
Yay.
book.
Thank you.
Robbie Couch, he, him, is the author of the young adult romantic comedy novel, The Sky Blues. His work has been published in HuffPost, Upworthy, and O, the Oprah magazine, among other outlets. Originally from small town Michigan, Robbie now lives in Los Angeles, where he remains in constant fear of aggressive birds and on the prowl for his next bowl of noodles.
Yes.
Welcome to the two of you. I am incredibly happy that you guys are here. You're just such uplifting, sweet online presences, and I'm so glad to be able to actually talk to you guys in this capacity.
Thank
Oh
you
my
so much. I'm
gosh.
so happy to be here.
Yes.
And we have people in
Ditto.
the comments. Hi, people in the comments.
Hello, people in the comments.
Hi, everybody. Oh, thank you, Casey.
Oh, there are the comments.
And Anthony. And Craig.
Yes. Oh, Casey.
Hi,
Hey,
Matt.
Casey. Oh my
Thanks
gosh.
for-
And Craig. See, I can't look at the comments because then I'll go down a comment rabbit.
Me
I won't
too.
even talk to you two. But no, I'll try
Yeah.
to keep my eyes on the comments too. Hello, everyone.
Yeah, if you guys have questions, feel free to ask to the people in the comments. We love you guys. We love engagement. It's just all right. So let's start. I always think it's really interesting when I this is like my fifth shop talk now, and I always find it really interesting when I have my guests. I do try to sort of pair people who I think would be a good mix and whose books are kind of similar. But it's kind of the minutia that you guys have in common that will make me really happy. And so the first question is about the word fuck. You two actually both in your books avoid using the F word mostly.
Okay. I'm like, where are you going with this, Aaron? What's happening right now?
So I was wondering if you two wanted to talk about the choice sort of not to really use that word, if that was your own sort of organic choice. I know, Robbie, I think Robbie's talked about it a little bit in something I saw. So if you have an answer ready, and then JJ can go after.
Yes, I always love talking about the F-bomb. How did I approach this? In my initial draft, I had many more F-bombs than the final one. And then I realized, I think sometimes too, and I forgot where I was listening and another author mentioned this, but I think it was Adam Silvera maybe. But he mentioned sometimes using curse words or just words that are inappropriate just to artificially heighten the tension or whatever. It's kind of and not all the time. I'm not at all opposed to swearing in my work, obviously, but sometimes I feel like it can kind of be a crux. And I was maybe doing that, I think, at times throughout The Sky Blues. Instead of actually kind of peeling back the emotion of what this character is truly feeling and making that a part of the dialogue. And also, I think in the first draft, I would have to be fact checked on this, but I had like many dozens of F-bombs. And I think for for the genre too, not to say teenagers don't swear or can't read swearing, of course they can, but like I also wanted to be mindful of maybe the youngest of the young readers who might be reading the Sky Blues. So that was also part of the discussions I had with my publishing team. But for the most part, it was about kind of making the integrity and the quality of like the characters, improving that. So yeah, we nixed quite a few F-bombs throughout the editing process.
Awesome. And JJ?
For me, it was more about the region and like how Jay grew up. He grows up in a small rural community that's also heavily religious. And that was the same kind of community I grew up in. And there was regular, intense peer pressure to not say fuck. Like that there would be ways around that all the time, because I never went to church or anything, but my church going peers had it ingrained in them that that was bad. And then they brought it into school. And so it just kind of became part of the school culture. Of course, there are still people who would say it and it would slip out occasionally, but it was way more common to hear people.
Oh,
JJ's internet again. Again, a lovely freeze.
Yeah. Maybe not as glamour shot as the last one, but still not too bad.
Yeah. All right.
Man.
Well,
sorry, JJ.
I can talk a little bit about my worry, because Robbie, you and I share an editor.
Yes.
And so I'm wondering now, I have so many F-bombs in my manuscript. Like, I feel like my crutch words are like just. Just is a really bad one. I'm always using just. And then the other one is probably the F word. And so now I'm thinking, like, when I get my edit letter, if it's going to be like, take out half the fucks.
And I'm like, no.
Yeah.
No, I can't speak for Amanda, so I don't know. I don't know if Amanda's here or not, but oh, bye, Jason June. Hopefully you'll reconnect soon. But yeah, I'm sure it'll be fine. And I was gonna make another point on this, but it just slipped my mind. So carry on.
Totally fine. And I think it was your talk with Adam Silvera, where I heard you talk about, the two of you talking about using sort of curse words as a crutch. Because he wasn't really using them in Infinity Sun, the first one, right?
Yeah. Yes, he did make that point. But in general, he's like very pro.
Yeah.
Very pro curse words.
I guess, yeah, it never hurts to prune something, I guess. So I'll have to go back and see if all my fucks are necessary.
But I mean, but in your defense, I feel like if it's authentic to the character and it makes sense for them and the world around them, then it's like, of course keep it in. But that wasn't the case with the Sky Blues. I was definitely going overboard, and it just felt like yeah, I needed to cut back a little bit. And also, now that we're dealing with a few technical issues, is my audio okay? Because I know someone mentioned that they couldn't hear me that well, but hopefully I'm okay. Oh, it's good now. Thank you, Craig. Okay, thank y'all.
And DPJ, thank you for letting us know. Cool. We can sort of move on to the next question, and whenever lovely JJ comes back, we can get back to his or her answer about cursing. And this might be pretty quick for you, because the question is about COVID, and that if I don't know what the timeline of writing the Sky Blues, but I'm wondering if that ever came up, like whether to acknowledge it or set it in that, or I guess you couldn't set it in COVID times, but to make a mention of it or something,
Yeah.
We could talk about that.
No, for sure. It definitely was a part. So I had the story completed before COVID hit. I'm trying to remember the exact timeline. I think in the spring of 2020, we were sort of like finishing up a lot. Yay!
I'm so sorry. Continue.
No, you're good. So I'm just answering the question about COVID, and if COVID like played a role during like the writing process, if I wanted to make a part of the story or ignore it or whatever. So yeah, so the story was completely written by the time COVID hit, but it was still in the revision stage. And I remember having a conversation with my editor, sort of about like, okay, do we want to incorporate any elements of like reality into the book? If so, how do you want to do it? But the problem was, it was a pretty quick discussion, because the more the more we thought about it, we realized it would have really meant some pretty big plot overhauls. Obviously, it's a global pandemic, and like they were a big part, to anyone who's read The Sky Blues, a big part of the story is like going to the movies and they're in a restaurant. I mean, so there's definitely there would have been some big changes. And another part of the conversation too was just the fact that, like, yes, there's some more serious and darker elements of The Sky Blues, but overall it has a lot of rom-com vibes, and it's a feel-good story. And so I love the idea of it sort of being an escape for folks to read in this moment. And so the idea of, like, you know, bringing in the global public health crisis into the story was like, I don't know if I want to do that. So yeah, The Sky Blues completely takes place in a world that where COVID does not exist.
Gotcha. And so, Jason, June, if there was anything else you wanted to add to the question about cursing, and then the question was just about how the timeline of your book, how COVID affected that, and because you did choose to acknowledge that, which I thought was really interesting. And so, if you want to take those two questions.
Yeah, definitely. In terms of fuck, just didn't use it a whole lot because it wasn't regionally and culturally part of Jay's experience. And so when he then moved to a big city, he still like can't shake that habit of avoiding the word. But in my other works, I do have characters that'll like swear and everything. And so it's not a personal thing, but more like Jay's upbringing. As for COVID, that's actually interesting because we've now taken all of the references to it out in the final version post arc. Because for me, it was like a big coping mechanism. And I thought that there would be some other people that needed to have a sort of reassurance that there will be a world where we're post-pandemic and we'll be able to do everything that we could do before again. And especially in Jay's world, and the whole concept of Jay is really about physicality and about sharing your body with other people. And so I wanted to acknowledge to readers who are like, well, we haven't been able to do that for over a year, that it's going to get back to that we can do that. But then as people were reading the arcs, there were some people that that were, I think, triggered by references to the pandemic, even though it was a passing reference and making it, I thought, clear that the pandemic was behind us and that this is like a now post-vaccinated world. But for some readers, it was more like, wait, there's been hearing COVID or pandemic or corona quarantine slip them into being back in that reality where we have to be away from each other. And I didn't want to confuse anybody or make people feel, I guess, just triggered by that. And so we decided to take those references out.
Awesome. It's so, again, this is part of like why I always wanted to just talk to authors about craft stuff, is like, that's so interesting. And it's stuff that I'm guessing wouldn't come up in a talk where it's like, do we need more coming out stories? You know, like, although I do have a question about coming out stories, but it's sort of, but it's so interesting to hear that. And I'm so glad that, you know, you guys did what you thought was best for the book. And, you know, the final copy is going to be something that, I mean, I really enjoyed the arc, obviously, but people can really enjoy the final version, which is really cool. All right. So, I mean, I guess we could just go there, right? We can talk about coming out stories and that whole thing. I've never sort of liked when people said we have enough, because it's like, have I ever seen like a lesbian Chinese girl coming out book? I don't think so. I don't like it might exist, but I personally have never read it, and I don't think, you know, we have enough intersectional comings outs. But with you guys, I really did appreciate your approach to coming out, because, you know, you kind of did it in different ways. Jason, June, I know with Jay's Gay Agenda, like it's a coming out book for, I think, like 10 pages, and then And then it's like, okay, now that that's out of the way, like let's continue this. So can you guys talk about the coming out in your books and that whole thing? JJ, why don't you go first?
You got it. Yes, I wanted to have that moment for Jay, of explaining the coming out, because it's such a big part of our lives. Like the moment we first came out to our community at large, but then didn't want the whole novel to focus on that. So now it's like, you've come out, now what? And especially if you're in an area where nobody else has come out and you really just want to be kissed and have a boyfriend and then have sex, like how am I going to do that without anyone around? So it's like that whole story. In terms of coming out books in general, I think they're so important, and there can never be a limit of like, we've had enough now, because we're coming out every single day of our lives. And some of us, like, I can walk into a room and people know something's up with me, that I'm not like following the normal rules, and that my physicality comes out for me. Or just to your point, Aaron, exactly like you said, we've had a lot of coming out stories from a very cis and very white viewpoint, and we need to expand the table to fit everybody and have all those coming out stories. And from that pivotal first coming out, and then continuing to explore what it means to come out, even as we are out young adults, we'll still be having those coming out moments, and how it shifts after that initial, hey, I'm gay, hey, I'm lesbian, hey, I'm genderqueer, whatever it is. After that, I think we'll see a little bit of an evolution and inclusion of new coming out stories that include how you continually do it.
Yes, totally echo. Are you going to say something, Aaron?
I was going to say, and Robbie.
Okay, important to get that in there. No, totally ditto. I kind of just want to steal your answer and say that was mine, but I totally agree. And I also think it's important because sometimes coming out stories kind of just get condensed into like this one singular experience in the way that it's perceived, or the way that it's in a lot of mass media or stories. And it's like, if I talk to all of my gay friends or all my queer friends, every single one of us had a slightly different way of coming out. We came out at different ages. We used different methods. Some of us came out one person every month over the course of years. Some of us just burst out of the closet in a matter of like an hour, and everyone in their lives knew about it. So there's so many ways to tell like the quintessential coming out story, because there is no quintessential coming out story. So I'm not at all opposed to coming out stories. I think they're wonderful. And some of my favorite queer stories have a coming out like narrative arc to it. I think for me, I sort of similarly, I wanted to explore kind of that immediate post coming out phase of Sky's life. So he is out within like a few months before the story starts. And but even though he's out, he's still navigating his life and kind of moving through the world in a queer body for the first time. So he's experiencing some awkwardness. He's not sure how much to wear his queerness on his sleeve because he's dealing with some homophobic bullies at school. So he's kind of in this weird place where he's trying to find a new normal with what it means to be openly gay in, small conservative Rockledge, Michigan. And I feel like that story of like that immediate post coming out period is one that I hadn't personally read a lot of those stories. And so I kind of wanted to explore that with Sky. But yeah, I'm all about any sort of queer experience on page. I think is valuable and worth telling. So we definitely need all the queer stories. Bring on the coming out stories.
Yeah. I kind of see both of your books as sort of like a hybrid sort of thing, because there are comings out, but because there are so many comings out, like JJ, you said, like we'll be coming out almost every day. Like it's just, unless you've met every person on the planet and told them your every identity, like you're going to be, continually coming out. And so I think that's really cool. And we've kind of touched on this next question a little bit. We've talked about location, and that's something that I'm always curious about, because I sort of, it's really hard for me to set something that's not where I grew up in like East LA, because I just, especially with like YA, because I didn't really leave where I was from when I was a teenager. So I wanted to know what you guys sort of went through and how you played around with location and setting. And I think Robbie, your town is made up a little bit, but like based on a real place. And JJ, I think Seattle's a real city. But yeah, so I'm wondering
So
how
I've
you.
heard.
Sounds fake to me, but kind of like Atlantis. But yeah, Robbie, do you want to go first?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, so setting was absolutely important to the Sky Blues, just because well, there is in a few different ways the idea of like the color blue having some meaning involved with like the setting and in northern Michigan and like the pristine nature of the setting, but also being a small town with that has some like darker bigoted components to it. So like that dichotomy was something that I kind of wanted to explore a little bit with the Sky Blues. But yeah, to your point about sort of struggling with having a story being told that's not where you grew up, I'm kind of in this a similar boat where I feel like if I were to do that, so with future stories that I'm writing right now, they're not in Michigan. Book 2 is set in Chicago. I lived in Chicago briefly. So I still feel like I can pull from like my Midwest experiences and like living in Chicago. But I think, whenever you can't pull from personal experience, you kind of just have to put in the work of making sure you're being authentic and being real and not, like I wouldn't set a story in Seattle with really putting in the work of knowing what that experience is like for my characters. But for the Sky Blues, having that small town Midwestern feel really became integral to Sky's experience. So that's why it was really important for me to like have it there and explore everything that meant for Sky and his friends.
For JSK Agenda, we start in Riverton, and it's a very huge stretch from Riverside, where I grew up, in this small rural farming community in Eastern Washington. But I actually at first had it just straight up Riverside, and then decided to just switch the ending a little bit, just in case people from there read it and thought I was trying to say every single fact that I put in there about it was the truth. So I wanted to have that be a little trigger of like, no, this is still fiction. There might be some basis in fact, but it's still fiction. And some of the facts and the demographics and all that are a little bit different in reality. But then with Seattle, I wanted to go there specifically. That's where I had my whole queer awakening, was in Seattle. And I have really big, fond memories of that time. And I think it's there's something really fun about a city that is so well known for being like so gloomy and depressing for some people, to have that much rain, but have it be such a joyous time in someone's life and still be such a vibrant, huge city in this seemingly like dampening environment. And so I think I felt like Seattle was the right place to be. In my next book, it's in LA, which is a place I lived for a really long time. And I'm also working on something right now that starts in Austin. So I try to use these spots that I've lived because I really liked where I've lived for the most part as an adult. So I think that they offer fun things for the stories.
Awesome. Yeah, I mean, I hope maybe one day I branch out and I'm like, I'm going to set this in New York. Like, I've been living here for 3 years, but I still don't feel like especially with teenagers too, because I'm like, high school is such a different experience based on where you are in the US. But yeah, maybe I'll do research, Robbie. Maybe I'll like try my hand at working hard at something. I don't know.
I mean, you don't have to. You could just always be in LA, and I'd be for that. I think it's kind of fun when authors do that, because I know a few authors do that, and I always kind of respect that. So kind of cool.
That is true. Yeah, maybe I'll make that my brand. All right, so let's talk about characters. I specifically want to talk about side characters, and specifically within that, I want to talk the best friend character. You guys both have sort of the, I think Bree straight, Robbie, I think, right?
Yes. Bree would.
Yeah.
Yes. You're not the first person to ask, but yes, Bree identifies as straight.
Yeah, so I think you both have a straight female best friend. And I was wondering how you guys sort of came up with that character and what you wanted their dynamic to be. And I also appreciated too, because this is something I had to do in edits, and not even like editor edits, like agent edits, and then like I had an R&R before. But something I had to do was sort of give my female best friend her own story arc. And I think something that was really cool in both of your books is that the best friend has a story arc, and they have their drama going on, and they're not just directly, they don't just exist for the main character. So I'm wondering if you could specifically, JJ, talk about Lou, and then Robbie talk about Bree.
Definitely. I wanted to have a straight best friend for Jay, first of all, because he's the only out queer kid in his little community. And I think it's just really shocking for people still in 2021 that there are communities where there's one out queer kid. And for a lot of well-meaning people, they'll be like, but we've legalized same-sex marriage in 2015. It's the heyday for gays. Everyone should be coming out, right? It's so easy now. And it's still not easy. It's still this whole like soul searching moment. And we're still seeing from very, very young, the vast majority of characters in books and TV are straight and cis. So it's not this just like gay paradise necessarily that some people might think it is. And so Jay's best friend would be straight because it's just a land of straight people for him. And I think it's also just a really common pairing in high school when you're discovering yourself as a gay boy, that there's a sort of safety in finding female companionship. There can definitely be female villainship too, but I think for me at least, there was this fear straight up of other guys and not feeling safe to expose these inner parts of myself, especially when you're getting in situations like locker rooms and things like that, not knowing what could happen if I say, hey, I'm the gay guy. And so I think that that's still a very real experience and led to the decision of Lou being straight. And then in terms of her whole story, it's based on her socioeconomic struggles, and that she's raised by her aunt because both of her parents are dead. And it is just really hard when you're living in a rural community that doesn't have a vibrant main street or a business community to get by. And there's only so much you can do out in a secluded area that's far from a big city. It's if you don't have access to a car, you can't drive to a big city to get a job. If the one diner is already full up of employees, you can't get a job. So that's Lou's very real struggle. And I think that's important for people to see who are like in Jay's situation, which was also my situation, where we're just solidly middle class. And it's not like we're pulling in all these extras, but we can get by and don't have to worry about paying the bills. But some kids still do. And this is like subtly my way of constantly bringing up living minimum wage and how important that is. We need it. It's time.
Very, very well done, I can say.
I love that.
Robbie?
Jason, June, I want you to like work in a $15 minimum wage to every single response you have for the rest of the day. Just kidding.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, oh my gosh, what was the question? Oh, Bree. That's right. So with Bree, I love Bree. I've gotten the question like, who's your favorite character? And I'm always very tempted to say Bree because I love her so much, but I also can't say that I have a favorite because I feel like that's choosing children. But no, I love Bree so much, and I feel like her sexuality wasn't something that I feel like with different characters, there's different qualities or traits that kind of just like speak to you first in terms of like creating who they are. And her sexual orientation wasn't something that I thought of a whole lot in the beginning when I was creating who she was. And I think it started out with mostly wanting her to be, because she's such a loyal and like fiercely loyal friend to not only Sky, but to their whole friend group. And many of them are from marginal backgrounds, and she is relatively privileged in that her family has money, she's white, she's straight. And she's someone who, through building those friendships, really has become so empathetic to other people's struggles and really standing up for and fighting for other people who may not be like her in certain ways, but she's still someone who goes to bat for them. So I think kind of ironing out those aspects of who she is as a character was something that sort of took priority for me and became much clearer sooner than if she was straight or bi or gay or what have you. And then the further along I got in kind of ideating and figuring out the structure of the story, the more I kind of clarified who she was beyond that. And yeah, but I think there was other qualities about her that kind of took priority in terms of figuring out who she was at her core.
Awesome. All right, moving on to side characters, but parents. I feel like, because in YA you necessarily have minors who need guardians, that parents can play a huge role in YA novels. And I think you two had sort of you're at sort of opposite ends. If there is a spectrum, like you're at opposite ends because, Jay has some pretty great parents. I love his dad. It's not just that I'm attracted to him. It's that the way you describe him, I'm like, okay. But he's also like a really funny, cool person. And then Robbie, I don't know how much you want to give away about Sky's situation, but first chapter he's living in his best friend's house. So there's something there. But if you guys want to talk about, while I go grab a charger, if you guys want to talk about parents or guardians, I should say, the parental figures in your novels, and I'll be right back.
Yay. All right, I can take this one. Yeah, so it was with the parents and adults in general in the Sky Blues. It was something that I think I wanted to have kind of a spectrum of different adults. As you learn pretty quickly, some of them are awful and terrible people. I shouldn't say terrible people, but just maybe not quite as woke when it comes to queer issues, and use their positions of authority in the community in harmful ways when it comes to Sky's identity and other marginalized kids in their community. But at the same time, when I look back at my experiences growing up in a small town, it was so amazing to have adults who really, even in like very subtle ways, stood up for queer kids, even if there weren't any queer kids in the room, or if there were, but they were in the closet. Just having like a really subtle rainbow flag in your classroom, or like mentioning queer history and like bringing in queer history in a history book, even though there's no chapter in the actual textbook about, Harvey Milk or whatever. Like those sorts of subtleties when allies who were adults kind of stepped up. I always noted those moments as a kid, even though I was closeted in high school myself. I came out when I was in college, but I always noted those moments and appreciated when adults really stood up and stood up for the queer kids. And so I knew I wanted to have that be a part of Sky's experience, because I think it's so critical that young LGBTQ people can see adult versions of themselves in the world around them, and to be able to see a gay teacher or a trans coach or what have you, to be able to see people that can share your experiences in that way was not something that I had growing up in small town Michigan. Hopefully that's changed and is continuing to change for teens nowadays, but that was certainly something that I wanted to have in the Sky Blues, was to have really solid queer allies.
I didn't hear all of that answer, but I love it.
Yes.
It was very good.
I'll rewatch. I will stream on YouTube.
It's gonna make my answer just seem very pedestrian, because I am the absolute worst with parental characters. I always have to add them in later drafts, because I'm like, wait a minute, where are the parents? Do parents exist here? Are they raising themselves? And for Jay's parents specifically, I wanted to show, because as we know, there's a lot of adults that read young adult, and I think there will be a lot of, to your point, Robbie, I think there will be a lot of parental or guardian figure allies reading this or reading queer literature in general, trying to figure out how they could be a better guardian to a queer child. And I wanted Tammy and Rick, Jay's parents, to just be an example of like, it doesn't have to be an earth-shattering moment. You don't have to totally change the way you speak to your child. You just need to acknowledge their humanity and that and their specific personality and those needs. But it doesn't have to be this whole, every conversation is about you being gay, or everything is like, I'm the cool, accepting gay kid parent now. Isn't that great? It doesn't have to be that. You can be just as hideously embarrassing as you ever were before as a parent. And Jay's parents are. Their main thing is, we support you, we love you, and wrap it up if you're gonna have sex. So that's where they get their cringy parent moments in.
Yeah. I got when I was editing, I got so much of where are the parents, and I was like, my parents were never home, they were always working. But like I do
Exactly.
appreciate but it is weird, like as you were saying, adults who read YA, I love a good parent, or a good like adult figure in a book who, like, I'm like, I wish I had that. That's just always like a really great moment to be like, I love this person, I would date this person, they're age appropriate for me.
Right.
I know, isn't that kind of sad when you start writing young adult and you're like, oh wait, I'm definitely closer to the parents' age than I am to the characters. It's kind of a sad moment. I mean, it's not sad, it's just different.
it's a revelation, right? Like it's a realization. Kylie Jenner. All right, so we've talked about side characters, we talked about location. I want to get into the nitty gritty of this. And this is, again, I love talking this with authors, like off camera. I'm just like, what's your word count? How many chapters do you have? What's the word count for your chapters? Are your chapters the same length? Are there, because I like when I'm writing, I sort of get insecure about that a little bit. And you're like, is this too long? Is this too short? Like, it sounds like I'm talking about something different, but so I'm wondering about your counts, guys. What are your numbers?
I'll go first. Did I go first last time? I think I did, but oh well, I'll go first. I'll be quick. I think for Sky Blues, I don't know the exact count, which I feel bad about not doing my homework, but I think it's 70,000-ish. It's between 70 and 75,000. I think the first draft was it was closer to like 65,000, and then we kind of built it in a little bit. The question you asked about like the length of chapters, that was totally something that I was like not necessarily insecure about, but was like, am I doing this way off? Because I noticed there was some that were like 40 pages, and then the next one was like 2. So that was something I kind of like worked on a little bit with my editor in terms of just like and I think that kind of went hand in hand with the pacing and like the rhythm of the book too. But yes, I think the Sky Blues is around 70, and Blame for the Win, which is my next one, is about the same. So yes. Ooh, whoops. As I break my headphones.
For Jay, it's okay. I always had this problem where my ear pods would pop out, and I was like, what's going on? It's because I smile all the time, and when I smile, my ears move up, and then it moves the AirPods out. So every time you see me do that, it's because you guys just make me light up.
That's so cute.
But for word count, Jay was acquired at like 63,000 words, but Jay is published at like 86,000 words. We got some really good extra beef in there. There's 28 chapters, plus a prologue, and 86,000 is where we're at now.
Nice.
Awesome. So it sounds like you guys are sort of, I don't know if I made this up or if I got it from somewhere, but it sounds like you guys are like under drafters, and like that's really comforting because like that's me too. Like this is why Beheda started out at like 52,000 and now it's at 88, because it was just every single note was like, where are the parents? Or it's like, explain more about this or give the background on this or blah, blah, blah. So under drafters, I appreciate that. Because people always assume that editing is like chopping and killing your darlings and all this stuff. And it's like, actually, sometimes you just forgot to describe the room and people need to see stuff.
I think too, I came from my writing background is more in news reporting. I mean, I was never like a hardcore, like New York Times journalist, but I wrote for HuffPost and Upworthy where like word count was always like, it was always, even though it was digital, so it's like you could write as long as you want and it's not actually being printed. At the same time, there was an effort to be like concise and make sure every word counts, which I think in general is a good thing. But I think I kind of took that over to my creative side in a way that's like, no, you can beef it up. You can put in some emotion here. You can describe, what the wall looks like. So I think it probably has to do a little bit with like my writing background. But I hadn't thought about that, but I do think I'm a, what'd you call it? Underdrafter? Is that the word?
Yeah, I think that's what I said.
I had the exact same. I got my undergrad in journalism, so it's the same thing. Where it's just kind of like, be economical, get to the facts.
Yes.
And then it would be like, wait, how do they smell though? And like all these other things that you can add now.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I think the first sort of serious writing, not serious, but like me taking it seriously writing I did was screenplays. So in that you just feel like he walks into the room and you don't have to like, I mean, I guess you could if you're like a good writer or whatever, but I would always be like, he walks into the room, I'm like, I'm doing screenwriting so that there's, if it ever became a thing, a set decorator or a props person would be like the creative one to be like, he's wearing this, and like, and then I can just be like, this is what's happening, this is what they're saying. So yeah, no, I definitely got plenty of edits that were like, what does the living room look like? How big is it? How is this possible if, like, anyway, but good to know. Alrighty, let's talk. I'm always curious about timelines and the amount of time that your book spans. So Robbie, I think yours is. I know it ends at prom, but like
yeah,
the amount of time that.
So this is a really easy question to answer because instead of chapter type, like I don't have a chapter 1, chapter 2, I separate chapters by the countdown between the start of the book and the prompose, the senior beach bum party, which is where he's planning to propose. And so it's 30 days. So it's almost exactly. Yeah, exactly. Which I think annoyed some readers who were like, I just want to like reference a chapter, and it's because it's the countdown. They can't. It's like there's certain chapters that are both like 15 days and the next one's still 15 days. But I'm like, you know what? I wanted to do it that way. And some people like it. So there. But it's 30 days. And then at the very end, without giving anything away, there's a few extra, or yes, there's a few scenes that go beyond the 30 days. But it's basically the last semester, the 30 days and the last semester of Sky's senior year.
Yeah. I always, when I'm doing this, I always forget that I don't want to do spoilers. So I'm like, I just want to talk about the entire book and be like, oh, so this line on the last page that reveals everything. Like, what were you like? Why did you put the semicolon here? Like, I just want to do that, but so it's a good reminder to be like, don't spoil anything. JJ, I think yours is till I don't think this is a spoiler, but like it's the fall semester, maybe, right?
Yeah, and it's really the first, technically it's like a 3-month time span if you count starting in the middle of summer and those opening scenes. But really it focuses on the first 5-6 weeks of Jay's senior year of high school. So that's about it, a month and a half.
Did you two have to do, I remember initially my agent was like, make a calendar, because mine takes over the course of a summer, but it's like, can you please just plot out the days? If it's a Thursday, like, and you mentioned that, just how many days is it? Like, I had to do that. So did you two have to sort of make a calendar or some visual representation or anything to sort of be like, okay, this is the pacing, this is the plotting, this is the timeline?
Yes, I did, because with the Sky Blues, so there's a little bit of a mystery element to the story. So there's a series of events that had to make sense in terms of when they took place. So I actually, in the revision stage, I was like, my mind was mush. I had been editing the book and rewriting the book for so many months, years at that point. And I was like, you know what? Screw it, I'm making a physical calendar. So I brought out like big pieces of paper and like literally made a massive paper calendar where I could like bullet point events on each day. so it was kind of a lot of work, but after I did it, I was like, thank God, because I just was 100% sure that everything made sense chronologically. So yes, and I think especially with the 30-day time frame and kind of having the whole plot have to work within that framework, it was even more important to make sure just everything made complete sense. I think with other stories, like with book 2 that I'm writing now, there's much more like fluidity and room to be a little more vague in terms of the exact afternoon that this is, that this one scene is taking place on. But for the Sky Blues, it was, it needed to be like almost, in some cases, hour by hour, certainly day by day, it had to make sense.
Exact same thing for Jay's Agenda, where so much of the plot was based on what class they were in. So I had to make sure, okay, wait, fashion design isn't on a Wednesday normally, but it would be on a Wednesday this week because Monday would be a national holiday, so they wouldn't have school. So here's how they alter their schedule. Here's how the school runs all the classes. Here's how they do Fridays at half class days. So they get all 8 periods in. So here's what time of day it would be if he was in. It was insane. And every single revision, we found something where the day was off. Every single one until the very end.
Same though, it gets messy. And don't you feel like as authors, you're Googling stuff, you're like, I never imagined Googling this thing, but it's somehow related to like my timeline. Like I remember I was Googling like the specific moments of a sunset just to make sure that like the timing, and I'm not that that's that weird, but just like random stuff. I'm like, anyone who looked through my Google search history right now would be like, what is this person doing with their life?
Completely.
Yeah. So my main love interest is Muslim, and so there's a mention of Ramadan, and I wrote this in 2017, but as I was revising and sort of doing the calendar, it was 2018. So I used the 2018 calendar, but because Ramadan's on like a lunar schedule, it changes as the years progress. So the book's gonna come out in 2022, but it's on a 2018 timeline, and I keep adding stuff that wouldn't have happened then. And I'm like, I hope no one notices that like it's 2018, but I'm talking about this thing that happened in 2021. But yeah, no, it's a struggle. So if anyone in the comments has questions, now would be a great time to put those in the chat. Again, we're trying to focus on craft, but whatever you want to know from these two lovely people.
I'll answer whatever.
Robbie will literally do an episode of like, I don't know why I went to like an old 70s dating show, like option number 1, option number 2, option number 3. And I was like, he'll do that sort of thing. And I was like, why didn't I just say like The Bachelor or something? Yeah. So we have a question. I'm saving my favorite question for the end. So that's why I was like, if you guys have any questions. But they want to know pantser or planner, or some people call it plotter.
Hardcore planner. As every new story goes on, I realize I'm getting more and more type A, where I write this last book, my second novel, I wrote a 30-page outline of like, here's what's going to happen, so that I could write it faster. Part of it was because Jay sold in a 2-book deal, and the second book was due, like now is when it's due. And so I had to make sure that I had time to like actually write all this, and I couldn't just spend too much time discovering it. So I had to discover it beforehand through the outline, and that made my drafting so much faster. And I just really love every single second of planning now.
Yeah, totally ditto. I have to plan. I'm very type A because I've screwed myself over so many times where I got really excited about a story and was like, yes, I'm going to dive right in. And then by chapter 3, I'm like, oh wait, this massive like plot hole or thing that destroys the whole story is something I did not foresee. And so I think you save yourself by planning. And you do so, like whenever I outline, I get very, very specific as well. And like each chapter, I usually go chapter by chapter and have like very thorough like bullet points that not only cover like plot, but then also I try to get in there like character development points and like the emotional rhythm of, the scene and stuff, just because the more sort of pre-work and outlining you do, I think just it makes your life so much easier when you're writing it. So I'm a huge advocate for planner, and I feel like every writer is different, but oh my gosh, I don't know what I would do if I didn't outline first. It would be a hot mess for sure.
This is so funny because I pantsed all of This Is Why They Hate Us, and like I'd written 3 books before, and I'd written non-linearly, so like I did know where I was going, but with This Is Why They Hate Us, like I didn't know where I was going, and it was so like that's why the editing process was so hard, and it's still hard because I'm not done, but like there was a point where I mentioned my character's like mental illness in chapter 16. And there was like no hint of it. I mean, like he was make jokes or whatever that like kind of hinted at it, but I was like, oh, I have to go back and see, like sort of thread this through like every previous chapter. But I think I'm going to be a convert, and I think for the next book I'm just going to plot it out and just make my life so much easier. We'll see.
Do it.
We have another. We have another question. Robbie, this person wondered while reading and thinking of their own process. Do you worry about having, and obviously, JJ, I want you to answer this too. Do you worry about having too much pop culture references?
Thank you for the question. Who was it? Was this Justin? Justin. Thank you, Justin. I didn't really. I guess if I felt like I was dropping in pop culture references just to have it feel timely or doing it other than like making the story feel authentic, maybe I would question why I was doing it. I think you should question why you're doing basically everything when you're writing a book. But for me, it felt, and I think you're right, where I do have quite a few pop culture references, but I don't know, I feel like when you're a teenager and really just in general, like pop culture references, the music you like, the movie you're going to see, it's just kind of a part of everyday chatter, especially with Sky and his group of friends. Maybe it wouldn't be for another group of friends, but Sky and his friends love movies. It's a part of like who they are. They go to the movies like every single weekend. And so talking about celebrities and films and music is kind of just ingrained in their characters. And so for Sky, I wasn't too worried about it. For the book that I'm writing now, there's way less pop culture references just because it doesn't make as much sense with the world around Blaine and their interests and stuff. But for Sky, I think it made sense for who they are and what they're all about.
Same within Jay's Gay Agenda, where so much of Jay's ability to interact with queer culture is through like online pop culture stuff. So since he's the only out gay guy at his school, he just has that online interaction instead. So he'll reference RuPaul's Drag Race and Real Housewives and Will and Grace, all these things that he just consumes on his own because he doesn't have that connection at school. And I think as long as that pop culture is a part of your character, it doesn't matter, or not that it doesn't matter, but you don't need to worry about dating yourself or anything because that's part of your character's soul.
Awesome. All right, and our last audience question: what scene in your book was the hardest to write?
Ooh, the hardest scene to write. Do you want me to go first, JJ, or do you have a? I can go first if you want to think on it.
Deal.
Okay. All right. I would say probably, this is tough, man. I would say probably, and this is also one of my favorite scenes to write, if not my favorite scene. There is a party scene that's happening with Ali towards the beginning of the book, in the first third of the book. It's at Ali's house. And it's a very big scene, both emotionally with things happening for the characters, but at the same time, so I really wanted to get it right. So there was that pressure to make sure I'm like really having it be smooth and make sense and whatever. But then in terms of, I know earlier I was talking about like the mystery aspect of the story and the specific 30-day timeline. It was also kind of a big scene where a lot of things had to happen, and it had to feel not forced, but sort of just organically with, this series of plot points happening with different characters. So it was tough and very fun because it was a very like lively, fun scene. And for Sky to write it from Sky's perspective, I won't give anything away, but there was like a very exciting kind of romantic moment in that scene too that was really fun to write. But it was difficult because I felt like there was a lot of pushing and pulling of like, okay, this has to happen and they have to feel this way. But yeah, so it was difficult, but probably my favorite scene at the same time.
I would say it's not necessarily the hardest scene to write, but it was the one that I paused the most and like thought the most about was the sex scene in Jay, when Jay loses his virginity, because I wanted it to be clear that he's losing his virginity and certain things he's doing leading up to that, because this is a sex positive book, and it's really important to me that we end this sort of shame spirals that have been so prevalent in our culture of wanting to have gay sex or wanting to have sex that's not cis and straight. And part of ending that shame is naming some of the things that go down, like blowjobs and a person with a penis seeing another penis and wanting to interact with physically that penis. And writing this out and making sure, one, that I was doing justice to the act of like losing your virginity. It's such a special, exciting, scary moment. Also wanting to be sure that it didn't go too far into like erotica, but still making it really clear so that teen readers reading this who are having these thoughts know you're not dirty for having these thoughts. You can read the fact that Jay wants to put his mouth on this guy's penis and no, you're not dirty for wanting to do that. You are not alone for wanting to do that. And it's okay to voice these thoughts to yourself, because if we can't even put them on a page or put them in a teen friendly format, then that is implying that it is dirty or not okay to say those words. And as long as everything is safe and consensual, everyone's on the same page, it's the most beautiful thing to have sex with somebody. Or the most like exciting. It doesn't even necessarily have to be beautiful or about love, but just about the two of you figuring yourselves out. And so that was really what I wanted to think about and make sure I got right the most of any scene.
I want to give you a standing ovation. I'm glad we're recording this interview so that I can clip it and blast it all over the internet. Yes, co-sign 100%. Yes.
That was lovely. I feel like when people ask like what was your hardest scene to write, authors will be like this scene, and then I'll be like, that was one of my favorite scenes. Like yeah, I was so amazed, JJ, by the losing of the virginity scene. I was just like, this is explicit, but it's not like, yeah, like you said, like it's not erotic or like it's in this teen boy's head, and it's something that even I'm not going to overshare, but like something that I really related to about like the first time that I with the dude, like it was just like so validating it, and I really loved it. And then Robbie, that party scene, I was right there with Sky, and I was like, oh my god, like I would feel that exact same way if like
Right.
yeah, those are two really good scenes. All right, so that leads us to my last question, and it's my favorite. It's about, I'm trying to again like not spoil anything, but it's about like, you know, whether there's one love interest or there's multiple, whatever number in your book. How did you go about writing the love interest or love interests so that the reader sort of, I mean, I'm, you know, at the beginning of the book, you're not going to be like, this is how it's going to end, but like sort of, you know, giving the reader, making a promise to the reader of like, however this ends up, like I knew how it was going to end up, and I sort of wanted to not control, but like to sort of prepare you for this happening, right? So it's like in other books, not your books, sometimes you're reading it and you're like, oh, I hope they don't end up with this person, even though they really like them, because like I've seen some red flags, right? So like, how do you go about that process of creating a love interest or multiple and being like, I want to give these people these certain attributes, and I want the reader to be happy that it ends how it ends, whether they're with them or not?
For me, it's making sure the love interest has just such a overridingly clear aspect about them that this protagonist that hopefully we're rooting for, or at least invested in how they end up, even if they're like an unlikable person and we don't necessarily root for them, but understand that they love somebody and want to see how that goes, or are interested in somebody. I just want to make sure my love interest has something that's so clear about them that matches up with something about the protagonist. So like with Albert, he's somebody who just lets anybody be themselves. Jay always talks about feeling like this prepubescent dweeb or being a geek because he's so interested in numbers and stats that he feels like he's not a cool kid at all. And he's not a cool kid at all in that like stereotypical way, but kind of worries about it. And Albert makes it really clear to him, like, that's the best part about you is you're just being you and you have your whole interest too, and you let those shine. That's my favorite part, is when you stop thinking about what I'm thinking about it and you just let yourself be yourself. And then with Tony, who's like the other guy that Jay is interested in, Tony is just a really physical kind of person, and that's all Jay wants to think about lately, is what it will be like to get physical. So it's just having that really clear characteristic that is tugging on that protagonist, so that at least the reader hopefully is interested in finding out what happens with that person, even if they're not necessarily into that characteristic themselves.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah.
No, that makes sense. This is a very good question, but it's hard to answer. I think for me,
I set up a minefield for you. Like, I'm so sorry, but
No, but it's a good question. I think for me with Sky, and this is specific to Sky and not necessarily like other books or other stories I would write, but so much of his journey, like he was on his own personal journey, but also a part of that journey was understanding his own privileges and interacting with other marginalized characters, and not even marginalized characters that were different than him, although some of them were, but just learning from other people's perspectives about what those walks of life might be like. And so with even some of his closest friends, his perceptions are challenged throughout the book. And with one of the characters, again, I will try not to be spoilery, but with one of the characters, there was a moment where he sort of had this aha moment where he learned something about the way that he was perceiving someone being wrong, and he was wrong about that perception, and something went off in my brain in the drafting process, being like, oh, there's something here where these characters could connect in a special way. And so that sort of led me down that path. But it wasn't supposed to be, like, if you read The Sky Blues, I think most readers will probably get to a point where they can sense where the narrative's going with the love interest, and that's totally okay. And I love that. It's not supposed to be some like completely out of left field thing. But at the same time, what the way it goes down and the way that, again, spoiler, I don't want to go there, but like what happens will hopefully be a pretty nice mini surprise.
Yeah. All right. Yeah, no, I love that. You did a masterful job of sidestepping like every sort of, yeah. That's all the time we have, guys. This was so lovely. I'm always just so, I don't know why I'm surprised, like it happens every time, but like I love talking with authors. I love talking with diverse authors, and you guys were so lovely this time. I want to thank Jason June, author of Jay's Gay Agenda, and Robbie Couch, author of The Sky Blues, for joining me. I want to thank Carter and Astoria Bookshop for hosting us. I want to thank everyone for tuning in. If you would like to see previous Shop Talks featuring the award-winning best-selling authors Kason Kellender, Adib Karam, Leah Johnson, Avdi Nazemian, Elsie Rosen, Arvin Ahmadi, and Marco Shiro, you can find those on Astoria Bookshop's YouTube channel. Do you guys want to plug your socials?
Yeah, you can just at Robbie Couch. You can find me on Twitter and Instagram. And now I want to check out all the other talks because you just name dropped some really great people. So I will definitely check those out. But sorry, continue, JJ.
Nice. And you can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Hey Jason June.
Awesome. And I'm on Twitter at Aaron H. Aceves. That's AARON HACEVES. And then on Instagram, totally different, Aaron Aceves. No H. All right. I had a lovely time, guys. Thank you so much for showing up. And like you said, every Shop Talk author, you guys now included, are an illustrious, just wonderful bunch. And I'm so happy. And Carter, you can take us out whenever.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much for having us. This was so fun.
Yes, ditto.